Thanks, Jonathan. While he gets himself all set up, let me read a little bit about AirGarage and Jonathan. So, Jonathan Barkle is the co-founder and CEO of AirGarage, the 21st century parking operator. He started this company in 2017 while he was an undergrad studying physics, struggling to find affordable parking at his campus. They got their start by going door to door and renting out homeowners' driveways to students with spreadsheets. But today they operate 100 parking lots and garages on behalf of owners across the country. And Jonathan, I laughed so hard when I read that because I almost didn't graduate college because of a parking dispute, because I just thought the parking situation was crazy and overexpensive. So, and you went and did something about it. So my hat off to you. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Bethany, and just want to make sure you can hear my audio okay.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, well, and so I mean, it's a pain point that everyone that has really felt at some point or another is the pain of not being able to find parking. And really in the early days, like I mentioned in that intro, is we started out just renting out people's driveways, which was a cool idea, and the news really loved to talk about it. But at the end of the day, it was just not a very sustainable way to solve the parking problem, given that there are only so many driveways in the world, and realistically, they're not in the places where people really need to be parking. And so, over time, Air Garage evolved as we kind of grew, and we realized, hey, there are much bigger problems in the kind of quote unquote parking space. And at the end of the day, one of the reasons that we as drivers can't find parking spaces when and where we need them is because of poor management, basically, really. And it comes down to whether or not the basically whether or not the management company or the owners are allowing spaces to be used efficiently, and whether or not they're tracking and using data to manage those spaces. And so that whole thesis is what led us to building what Air Garage is today. And Air Garage, as Bethany mentioned, is a 21st century parking operator. So if you think of things like standard parking, LAS parking, ACE parking, we do a lot of the same things that those companies do. We just try to do them with the tactics that are more status quo in 2020 and a lot of other industries, using software and a lot less hardware and manual labor. So I'll kind of walk through a lot of what that is. It's not going to be quote unquote a traditional demo, given that this is not necessarily a pure software company. So I can't unfortunately walk you through a parking garage as I would like to right now, but we'll get as close to doing so as we can. So really, let's start off by thinking about, what is the parking industry kind of currently, and how did we get to where we are. Really, the parking industry, oftentimes if you're looking for a parking management company or a parking operator to take over your parking asset and manage it, one of the things that they're always touting is, hey, our company was founded in 1920. And that sounds like a really great thing at first. It sounds like, okay, they must have a lot of experience. But one of the things we find is it also means that they oftentimes do things in the same way that they have been doing them since 1920. And so they're still manually accepting cash payments. They're still dealing with parking gate arms that break and cause issues for the property managers. And just all around, it's really an old school offline industry. Mobile payments are pretty much standard in most other industries. If you go into a restaurant these days or anything like that, you're paying with your phone a lot of times rather than paying in person or paying with a machine. And that's not necessarily the kind of the status quo in the parking industry. And it's really a mismatch of incentives where oftentimes the parking industry, the way that they get paid is on a cost plus model, where they charge the parking lot asset manager or owner a $3,000 a month parking management fee, but then they also pass through all of their costs with 5% added on top of that. And so their incentive naturally is to increase the costs so that their plus is also bigger. And so it's really these fundamental underlying issues that have caused the parking industry to lag behind other industries in terms of where they're at technology wise. And so just some visual examples that we've stumbled across in the real world of what the parking industry status quo is. This parking gate arm that you see down here at the bottom left is from a parking garage that we now operate. We tore out the gate arms because this was what they were doing before. Drivers would constantly drive through their gate arms and break them, and that means that they can't collect revenue, but it also means that people are getting free parking. And they got so tired of replacing these gate arms at $800 a pop every time that they had to do that, that they were just duct taping them with some jerry-rigged 3D printed parts and trying to solve it in a less expensive way for them. And so really the incentive for this parking gate machine manufacturer is to increase the costs of the end user, the parking garage owner, by selling them more parts. And then these signs really are just examples of how confusing it can be as a driver, where you pull up and you're like, okay, which sign do I need to pay attention to? What is the process for paying here? And really, that's because the goal of the parking companies in America right now is not to actually get you to pay. It's to get you to, walk away without paying, so that then they can write you a ticket or they can tow your car, and that's how they really make their money. And things like this in the top right are pretty status quo, where you come up to a machine, you have all intents of paying, and you really just need to park in this space for 10 or 15 minutes. But then you get to the machine and there's a credit card jammed and you can't even pay. So then you're like, well, I'm kind of screwed here and I'm just going to have to take the risk. And the parking companies really don't care because they want you to get that ticket, right? And so that's where we come to what we built at AirGarage. Really, what we're focused on is, like I said, building a 21st century alternative to these old school ways of doing things. So our entire system is based on signage and software rather than hardware and machines. And so that means that there's no upfront cost. People are paying through their phones. It's fast, it's contactless, it's never has downtime like those machines do. And then we're able to offer a lot more transparent operations with real-time analytics, updates, things like that. Those are all things that we'll dive into a little bit more as we continue on. But the first thing that a driver experiences when they come into an AirGarage parking lot is that payment aspect. And so it's these people are your customers at your parking garage, or they're your tenants. They're registering for monthly contract parking. They're customers of the businesses that are in your building. They're validating parking. And so through software, we're trying to create the best possible experience for those people, rather than having to fiddle with tickets that they wind up losing to validate their parking, or giving the merchants these stamp machines that they use to validate those parking tickets, and really just trying to create a better, more up-to-date experience for these drivers. And so the full kind of suite of software that we build is really focused on creating that good experience for these drivers. So the first thing a driver experiences is when they pull into a parking garage or a parking lot that is operated by AirGarage, we have signage throughout the garage, throughout the parking lot. It's consistent signage with consistent messaging rather than 15 different signs that say 15 different things. And it instructs you how you go through and pay. And so when you pull into the garage, you pay, you start paying when you get there. When you leave, we track the time that you leave, and you are charged for the exact amount of time that you use. But really, the advantage of software is that you don't have to deal with the parking gate arms and the parking machines that are constantly breaking, because they're being sold to the building owners with the promise that if you install these parking gate arms, your garage is going to be automated and you'll never have to worry about it. And so pay us $150,000, install internet, install electricity, install these gate arms, and your garage will run itself. But then, the property manager winds up getting stuck with the issues at the end of the day when they have drivers drive through their arms at their gate arms, and then they have to fix that, or they have drivers stick their credit cards in that get jammed, or they just have any sort of complaint, then they have to deal with it. So with software and a gateless system, we don't have those issues. We don't have those hardware pieces that will break. And instead, people are paying through their phones, which, as long as their internet connection is there, then they're not going to have that same issue of not being able to pay. And so really our goal is to make this software as simple and straightforward and obvious to use as possible, because we want people to pay. We don't want to catch people and give them tickets and tow them. We don't want that to be the case. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for drivers to pay. So you're probably wondering, okay, that sounds really cool. What does that actually look like? So like I mentioned, there is these signs. These signs are the signs that are throughout our parking garages, our parking lots. And what they have is they say text pay to this phone number. And that phone number is custom for every parking lot or parking garage. Each has its own phone number. So this is what the experience really looks like. I recorded this last night using my desktop. Normally you would do this on your mobile phone, but all you do is you say, okay, I'm going to text pay to this 385-324-6323. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to type in the phone number, 385-324-6323. And so then I'm going to send a message, and all that message needs to say is pay. We say pay because it's easy to remember, but actually the driver can text anything they want to this phone number, and it will respond immediately, as you saw, with a text message link that they can click on to pay. So there's no app download required. They get taken to this very basic web page that asks them for their phone number, which is pre-filled because they just texted us, asks them for their license plate, and then asks them for a credit card. So we really try to boil it down to just the basic information, because a lot of other parking apps will ask you for your email, your car make and model. Feels like everything. Feels like they're asking you for your social security number at the end of the day. But really, it's all extraneous information that they don't need. And so we boiled it down to make it as simple as possible and make this experience as fast as possible. And so then they press this start rental button, and that starts a timer that counts up instead of down. And so it tracks how long did you park in the parking garage. We know that the hourly rate is $2 per hour. We track how long you're there for, and you tell us how when you leave, and then we bill you for the exact amount of time that you paid for parking. And if you ever close that page on your mobile phone, you can just go back to your text messages, click the link, and open it back up again to view your rental and end it. And so, in addition to this experience of, having your rental started and ended manually, we also have cameras at the entrance and the exit of every parking garage that we operate that automatically track license plates that enter and exit the garage. And so, the second plus time after you've registered with AirGarage as a driver, what we do is try to automatically start those rentals for you based on the fact that we saw your license plate enter the garage and then not leave the garage. And then when you leave the garage, we also end the rental automatically so that you don't get overcharged, and really just try to create a fair experience for the drivers so that they will come back and be repeat customers. So really the entire goal here is to create a simple and transparent process for them to pay so that they see what they're getting into up front. Because oftentimes what we find is low compliance rates are basically connected to the fact that people don't pay because the machines are hard to figure out, or they're broken, or the process is just not clear. And so then what they wind up doing is walking away and saying, well, I'm just going to risk it because I'm only going to be here for 15 minutes and I don't want to have to figure out how I'm going to pay. So then people risk it and they wind up getting a ticket. And that's really what the parking companies want at the end of the day. So our goal is really to increase revenue in the parking garages that we are operating. There's a lot of benefits to working with AirGarage as opposed to kind of an old school operator. The first one I would say is that there's no cash and there's no leakage. So we often talk to parking lot and parking garage owners that have attendants and they have cash, and they routinely tell us, hey, we expect that 20 to 30% of the cash that we have that comes in just goes right out the other end through the pockets of these attendants. And that's not true of every attendant. We've met very trustworthy attendants, but in general across the industry, the 20 to 30% leakage is kind of the expected leakage. And so when you compare that with something like AirGarage, where we are tracking every cent that processes through that garage through a database that cannot lie and cannot steal, that is a huge difference, especially considering that the way AirGarage operates is on a revenue share basis. So what we do is we do a 70-30 revenue share with every owner. So rather than charging a management fee and then passing through costs on a cost plus model, where the incentive is to increase costs, to increase the plus, to increase the margin of the operator, our incentive on a revenue share basis is to increase revenue and decrease our costs, because our 30% revenue share that we get covers everything involved in running the garage, from signage to cameras to payment processing to enforcement, everything involved. And so then our 30%, only the costs are only eating into our 30%. And so we're really trying to decrease those as much as possible while also increasing the cost or the revenue of the garage, because increasing the revenue increases our share of that revenue. So our incentives are aligned is really the point of the why we've chosen this business model, as opposed to, the old school business model where our incentives are misaligned with the owner. And, there's other benefits to using a software-based 21st century parking operator, such as the fact that we're constantly looking at data based on the market that the parking garage is in, what the prices are in garages surrounding it, and then also what the occupancy is at different times and days of the week, so that we see, okay, the occupancy is low after 6 p.m. in this garage, and there's street meters that are undercutting our price. So let's lower the price in this garage to match those street meters. Or we see, okay, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12, this parking garage is overfull and there's cars entering that are looking for spaces and can't find them. Let's increase the price so that we get to a 95% occupancy and increase the revenue. So those are things that are happening in real time through our system that an old school operator just can't handle, because they're printing, prices on signs and accepting cash, and it would just be way too laborious for them to do this manually. So through software, we're able to dynamically price and more intelligently increase the revenue. And on top of that, a lot of operators aren't operating 24/7, 365 days a year, because they simply can't staff the garage during those times. And so there's lost revenue during nights, weekends, evenings, times when the garage is not at peak demand, but still has demand, and there's still demand for parking in that area. So the next slide is a little much to look at right off the bat. What I'll say is don't try to digest this entire thing in 20 seconds, but what you're looking at is a comparison of a pro forma from a garage that we took over that was previously on a management contract with a classic old school operator. And you can see the old pro forma is on the left here. Our comparison on a quarterly basis and on an annual basis on the right here, you can see basically what the old operator was doing was looking at the adjusted gross income. I know these numbers are probably tiny for you, so don't try to read them. Looking at the adjusted gross income was like $800,000. Then they were passing through all of their costs to the point that the total expenses on their end were $354,000 of the 800,000, right? And then our total expenses is just that 30% revenue share that covers everything, like I said. So payment processing, all of our installed signage, our cameras, pretty much everything involved in running the garage. And then at the end of the day, the annual net operating income increase for the garage owner after switching from the old management model to our model, before factoring in any revenue increase that we're able to produce through dynamic pricing and always on operations, their annual increase was about $115,000, which represents a 24% increase in their net operating income on this garage, just purely by switching away from the old misaligned incentives model to the new aligned incentives model and going with a software-based operator where we don't staff a person 24/7, but that means we're able to lower their costs. So one of the things that comes up a lot, of course, is having insights into operations and how things are going, seeing data about the performance of the parking lot, seeing how things are trending basically day to day. And oftentimes people are really shocked by what we're able to offer here because the status quo of if you use software in your daily life, that software is updating in real time. And that's compare that with the state of the parking industry and reporting. Typically, if you read through a parking management contract, what they're saying is, okay, we're going to give you a full financial report by the 25th day of the month after your closing month. So if you close out March, we're going to give you the report for March 25 days later, and you have 60 days after the closing day of a month to dispute any charges. So they're just going to dump a spreadsheet on you and say, good luck. Hope you can find any discrepancies and let us know within 35 days if they're discrepancies, and we'll pay you back. And so problem with that is you have no time to prepare for that data dump that's going to get dumped on you. And they're really just dumping a bunch of data onto you and not giving you any insights. And so with AirGarage, what you have as an alternative is that real-time reporting and analytics, where built in as a base level function included with our system is basically a real-time analytics dashboard where you can see in real time how many cars are parked at different times, different days currently, and throughout the week what the occupancy looks like. And you can see the revenue based on each day of the week, how much traffic you got, and really understand what your garage is doing, but then also see before the month even happens, before the month's even over, how much is your garage earning and where is it coming from? Is it coming from evenings? Is it coming from daytime? Is it coming from weekends? Is it coming from flat rate rentals versus hourly rentals? Is it coming from contract parking versus daily transient parking? So it really is just the goal is to give as much data and insights to the owner as possible, but then also to interpret that data and not just make it a data dump, but to start to say, okay, these are the times that we see that your lot is the busiest. This is when it's full and this is when it's empty. And so here's the actionable insights that we can take to increase your revenue. We're going to increase the prices during the times when it's busy, and we're going to lower the prices during the times when it's not, so that then we increase the revenue of your garage through those insights rather than just dumping data on you and saying good luck with that data. So really it's all about providing a lot of data, providing a lot of transparency, but taking action and providing insights on that data that will actually increase the revenue of the garage rather than just saying good luck, here's a spreadsheet, hope you don't find any errors that we made and we have to pay you back for them, right? So the last thing that I'll kind of discuss here, I think, is the automated enforcement aspect. So what AirGarage does, oftentimes the biggest question that comes up is, okay, well, you won't have someone sitting on site because you won't have an attendant sitting there 24/7. How do you enforce against illegal parking? And so what we do is we install cameras at the entrance and the exit at our expense. This is included in our 70/30 revenue share. These cameras are LTE based and they are automatic license plate reading cameras. And so what they do is they automatically scan every car that enters and every car that exits the garage. So that means that we have a real-time list of what cars are in the garage, and we can segregate that list into who is a transient parker, who is a contract monthly parker, who has come in recently and has not taken any action. And we can set a grace period of, say, 15 minutes. And if you enter the garage and after 15 minutes, you have not either paid for monthly space, paid for transient parking, or validated with a tenant or a business that is on site and has power to validate, then we will ping our enforcement network. And so our enforcement network is basically this proprietary system that we've built out We call it the Space Force. We called it the Space Force before the other Space Force, I'll say. And basically what the Space Force is it's a network of contractors that get pings to their smartphones about issues in our parking garages and our parking lots. And so they're contractors that come through and help us leave warning notes, they help us issue tickets, and they help us immobilize vehicles. And so they're always around because they're the same people that are driving for Uber or driving for Lyft or driving for DoorDash. They're doing these gigs all around the city, so they're always present. And when we get an issue in one of our garages, we send a ping to the Space Force and request that one of them show up to basically immobilize or ticket a vehicle. And so we expect, less than 15-minute response times on those issues. So it's equivalent to having someone on site, but not requiring someone to be there 24/7. So we really try to automate a lot of this away and make sure that the experience for drivers that are in the system that are good actors is seamless, where they pull in, there's no problems with the gate arms, they never have problems scanning their passes to get in, and they're able to flow freely into and out of the garage. So there's never traffic at the exit waiting for people to get their tickets and pay. And the experience for people that are bad actors and have been warned and our system has caught them and there's data proving that their vehicle has been in the parking garage without paying multiple times, then we will take action and immobilize their vehicles. So this is what those look like in practice. This is just an example of a camera that was mid-install when the photo was taken, but basically you can see this camera is pointing behind the photo taker towards an entrance lane of a garage. So, pretty inconspicuous camera, but really the point is it takes photos of every car that comes in and comes out. And this is an example of what a car that we immobilize looks like. So we use, some of you may have heard of this, but it's a device called the barnacle. And basically the barnacle is a way to immobilize a vehicle. It's an alternative to towing or booting a car. And really the benefit of barnacling a vehicle as opposed to towing or booting is that it can be easily reversed if needed. So if you run a building and there's a tenant who has contract parking and they manage to typo their license plate and ignore warning notes, then they get barnacled and immobilized, and then they can complain and say, well, I paid for my contract parking, I just typoed my license plate by one digit. We can remotely release this device, take it off, and they will be on their way in less than 5 minutes, rather than having to go to a tow site and pay $200 to get their vehicle back if they get towed. So we really like the barnacle for a reversible solution to immobilization. Plus, it winds up causing a lot less confrontation with any drivers that are bad actors because they do not have to speak to a human representative in order to release the device from their vehicle. They simply pay online for the fine that they have been issued, and then they release it via a code that they enter into the device through the keypad that is on the device itself. So just to kind of recap some of the high-level concepts of what AirGarage is versus the old school gates, pay stations, or other operators. We offer contactless payments, so everything is done through software, really trying to create a seamless, fluid experience for the drivers through software. We use license plate enforcement, so there's true data on who has paid and who has not, as opposed to using tickets and not being sure what is going on in your garage. We do 24/7, 365-day operations, so we're always online. We do dynamic pricing to try to increase the revenue that your garage gets from different times and different days of the week, and that's all based on the data that we are collecting in real time about your garage. There are no upfront costs, no fees to get started, as opposed to with gate arms and pay stations and other operators, you may be upfront paying somewhere around $100,000 to $150,000 in equipment to install in your garage just for it to later break, and you have to pay maintenance costs in order to fix it. You get real-time updates via dashboard, so every rental that comes in, our dashboard updates, and you see it in real time, and there's no long-term commitment, so you're not committing to something that you don't know if it's going to work upfront. With the gates, the pay stations, you don't know how long they're going to last. You don't know if they're going to survive the 8 years that you need them to survive in order to amortize their costs. So really, we can cancel any time with 14 days notice. You can cancel with AirGarage anytime with 14 days notice if you're unhappy. We don't have customers cancel on us, but that's because they're happy, but we don't want them to work with us if they are unhappy. So we give them that option. And we want you to really, at the end of the day, have more control and flexibility over your parking asset and earn more income for you than any other operator. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. We operate about 100 parking lots and parking garages at this point. In the past 2 years, that's where we've gotten to. We're growing pretty rapidly and really excited to be working with potential partners in the future. So we'd love to answer any questions.
Thanks, Jonathan. So the first question is about how do people know what the parking rate is if it's a dynamic system?
Yeah, good question. So when you text pay to the phone number that is listed on the signs, the first thing that you see when you click on the link that is texted back to you is a page that shows you the real-time parking rate at that moment. And so if the parking rate has changed, you will see it there at that time, and you're aware that it has changed. And if there is an event coming up, like a special event, we'll tell you, hey, on that same page, hey, at 4 p.m., the parking rate is shifting to a $20 flat rate so that you know what you're getting into in advance. So we try to communicate as clearly as possible what the rates are while you're paying for your parking.
Will you talk a little bit about implementation and onboarding and kind of that process?
Yeah, certainly. So generally speaking, once we've worked with someone and gotten them to a place where they're excited to get started, the first step is signing a services agreement, which I said is basically 14 days cancel anytime policy and just covers that there's a 70/30 revenue share with us. So it's really basic. Once we sign that, it's typically about a 14-day turnaround time from the time that we sign an agreement to the time that we have signage and cameras installed in the parking lot and parking garage. So it's a really fast turnaround as opposed to parking machines and gate arms, which can be kind of on a back order for a long time. But one of the biggest differences is we're not just going to install stuff and then say good luck and leave you to it. Really, we're not selling a product, we're selling a service here. And so we're going to be there walking your staff through it, helping you along the way, helping you register tenants, helping you train the businesses that are on site, helping you get your contract parkers shifted over to AirGarage. So it's really all about us making sure that that goes as smoothly as possible because, like I said, we're on a revenue share. So our incentive is to make sure that that experience is good for your customers and your tenants.
So the question is about if someone vandalizes the cameras, is the parking lot under not under super, is it out of commission or, not under supervision anymore?
Yeah, it's a good question. And really, the system is designed to be fail safe in that sense, where as long as the signs are in the parking garage, it is still alive, it is still able to function, you are still able to pay, as opposed to if someone vandalizes a parking machine or gate arm, you can't collect revenue while it's down and offline. So just because a camera goes offline does not mean that the software system that is backing up and running the garage goes offline as well. So as long as the software system is online, people will still be able to pay. We would notice the camera and get a signal from it that there are no photos and license plates being collected, and we would replace it as soon as possible. Typical turnaround time on that is like 7 to 14 days. But in the meantime, it's still going to be running, still going to be collecting revenue, and we would have our network of enforcers go there on a regular basis to scan using their smartphones in the meantime, rather than relying on the camera that has been taken offline.
Well, when that question came, I thought, oh, it probably never really happens, but clearly it does happen all the time if you have that detailed of an answer for it. So
I wouldn't say
um,
it happens all the time, but it happens
it does happen
occasionally where
enough
it'll
for you
get
to have
bumped
that answer
or,
ready. Um,
you have to be prepared for anything.
this was a question I had too, and it's just, do you lose a lot of the barnacles? How does that process work? You said they just type in the code and they drop it off, but explain a little bit about how the barnacles work.
Yeah, great question. So that's one of the very common questions about a barnacle. So what happens when you pay for your barnacle is you pay for the fine, but you also pay for a deposit. So then what you're required to do, and it instructs you to do through the barnacle payment system, is you're supposed to leave it into a drop box. And the drop box you can picture is just like an oversized USPS mailbox that's big enough to receive a barnacle. And so we instruct you to leave it into the drop box. Then once our team checks that back in, ensures that it has not been damaged, and ensures that it's been returned, we release the deposit to you. So you pay a fine plus a deposit. The deposit gets returned to you once we get the device back. If they don't return the device, they just paid, $200 for a large plastic yellow thing with a GPS inside that they can't really do much with.
Yeah. So the last question in the last 2 minutes we have is just kind of, you guys have all this great, parking data, with COVID, the impact on transit and people working from home, just anything you guys are seeing, anything surprising?
Yeah, I think one of the surprising things for us has just been how quickly a lot of parking lots have returned back to a normal state. It certainly is kind of grouped into the classification of what is in the area. So university parking lots for us are still very much totally offline, depending on the state, but mostly offline. So our university parking lots in Arizona, for example, are totally offline. Our university parking lots in Oklahoma are doing, regular business. But then even within even across categories. So university parking lots are generally down, but parking lots that are in like restaurant districts or small business districts are busier than ever actually for us in a lot of cases where people want to be getting out and doing things and going to these restaurants to do social distancing, dining, and so they're parking in those lots even more than they were before when they maybe weren't itching to get out in the evenings to go dining or somewhere just to get out of the house. So it really depends on the category. of location that we're looking at, and it also depends on the state that we're looking at.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That's time. We really appreciate it. Take care.
Awesome.